My name is Benton Stokes. I'm a former fundamentalist, post-evangelical worship leader, and songwriter. I enjoy wry Manhattans, roller coasters, and road trips, just not all at the same time.
I'm Elane O'Rourke, and I'm a teacher, an author, and a spiritual coach. I was a philosophy professor and a liberal pastor in a couple of former lives, and these days, I love aha moments and not-so-dry martinis.
We have conversations about life and God with a queer perspective, over cocktails, like you. This is Cocktail Theology. So when we were getting ready to record this episode, and I was talking to you about cocktails, you mentioned that it would be really great if we had a cocktail called a bitter pill. So I found one.
Okay.
And I haven't tried it yet, but it smells fantastic.
It does.
All right, let's give it a shot.
What is it?
Wow, that's really good. So it is dark Trinidad rum. Mm-hmm. There's some simple syrup. There's some lime juice.
Yep, got those.
There's an egg white.
Okay.
And there's Fernet Branca.
Oh, that's the thing I wasn't able to identify.
Yeah. It's so interesting because Fernet Branca is a very potent flavor.
Yes,
like it's herbal, minty, mentholy even. Yeah. But in this, and I didn't use just a tiny bit. Like it called for the same amount of Fernet Branca as it did the lime juice and the simple and I was afraid it was going to be too much. But I was like, I'm just going to follow this recipe to the letter and we're going to see how it turns out.
I think it's the Trinidad rum. It just kind of melds together, right? And then the lime juice is very lime juicy.
Yeah.
I like it.
Really good. And this gets an orange twist.
I like it.
So it's been a week.
Yes, it has.
It's been a week since Election Day as we record this. And I have to tell you, and I'm sure that some of our listeners can relate, I was pretty shocked at the outcome. And I was sad and I was angry. And it took me a while to kind of settle down. We all lived through Donald Trump once already. And I believe the things that he says. He's not nearly as keen as he was in 2016.
Yeah.
I think he's diminished. But he is also surrounded by what I consider to be much more dangerous people.
Yes.
Than he was in 2016. So I was very upset. And honestly, the thing that kind of grabbed me by the shoulders and helped me snap out of it a little bit, I mean, I'm not going to tell you that I'm not still grieving because I am.
Of course.
Was this article that you shared with me, written by the New York Times writer David Brooks. I appreciate his work a lot. I generally appreciate his views. He wrote an article post-election, and the title of it is Voters to Elites, Do You See Me Now? And I'm not going to do this article justice. I would encourage our listeners to find it.
Yep.
But in it, he poses the opinion, and I think he's right, that voters in voting for Trump were not railing against Kamala necessarily. They were not railing against gay rights or abortion rights because, as we saw on separate measures, people were willing to split their vote between Trump and abortion rights, so given the option. They weren't railing against any of the things that the Democrats were really posing. Like they weren't being anti-Democrat platforms per se. But what they were is kind of anti-elitist. Mm-hmm. Elitist is one of those terms that's a little bit, it's not that it's hard to define, but it all kind of depends on where you are and your experience with what you consider to be or what you have experienced as elitism.
Yes.
So if you grow up in a town where there's maybe a private school as a kid, maybe, the private school kids, they have, bigger house, they have nicer stuff, whatever. And so you kind of feel like, right, you kind of feel like they're elitist, right? Mm-hmm. Because they have more. And maybe it feels like they flaunt what they have.
Right.
And that feels elitist.
Right.
And I think even you and I have had different experiences of elitism. Mm-hmm. We have felt like other people were the elitists. But one of the things that this article is really causing me to think about is, well, I think maybe I'm an elitist.
Right.
And the fact is, probably all of us, anybody that's listening, is to someone an elitist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the things that he really draws out in this article is that one of the things that makes elitist is education.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciated the fact that he was talking about a worldview rather than a behavior necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the main behavior that he was pointing to among we who are elitists, I'm just going to add myself, is that we tend to think, not that other people don't matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we're generous of heart, but we think everyone else has the same, like is the same as us.
Yeah.
Which is just a whole, it's such an invisibility problem, right?
Yeah.
So that, for example, the example I've been using all week is, if somebody lives in an area where, sure, they can get medical insurance, but there are no doctors, no hospitals, no whatever, and we're railing on about more insurance, more whatever, blah, 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 they're like, that doesn't affect me.
Yeah.
It doesn't help me.
It doesn't help me at all.
Right? So, yeah, so I found the article really convicting and helpful.
I did too.
And helpful.
Yeah.
As a way to get at the people I haven't been paying the right amount of attention to.
Mm-hmm.
I was saying the other day that I have no problem thinking about politics effect or economic effect on brown folks, on immigrants, on LGBTQ, on all of, all these other, but I don't think at all about white people scraping by. Like,
right.
They never appear in my head.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to make a decided effort to pay more attention.
Yeah.
Because if I have learned anything from this, it's that I was very, very, very blind.
Yeah.
And it is good for me to not be blind.
It's good for all of us to not be blind.
Yeah. That said, there's still the reality that a good chunk of the country is celebrating and joyful and convinced that the world is all going to turn around and be good. And a good chunk of the country is terrified for their own well-being, for their own safety, for their opportunity to be in the world, for the opportunity to read to children in libraries.
Right.
All those things. And I want to be able to hold, I'm a both and person, right? I want to be able to hold the fact that I was blind to this and I have work to do about that, like all the other work I have to do. And that doesn't mean that people's fear and depression and we worked so hard to build coalitions and we worked so hard and gone down in defeat, like all of those things that people are feeling are completely legitimate too.
Yes.
And the person that we elected is craven and is proud of being craven. It isn't like, I'm calling him this. I mean, he's made clear.
He flaunts it, yes.
He flaunts his cravenness. He is anti-Christ in the sense that he stands for nothing that Jesus stood for.
Yeah.
So the danger of him has not changed.
Not a bit.
Okay? And the fear that I have over losing all of the work of the last however many years, at least my entire lifetime, and I'm old, right? Losing all of that work, losing all of that safety, losing all the possibility of looking ahead and each generation being freer, safer, and so forth. To me, it is a legitimate and worthy threat.
It is.
To us.
It is.
So I think we have to hold both.
Yes.
I have to hold that people have good reason to be scared. And we need to pay more attention to the people we haven't been paying attention to.
Right.
Both.
Right.
My feed has been filled with sorrow. This may also point to my elitism, right? There was a meme I saw today that if you don't understand why your queer friend is afraid, you don't have a queer friend, you have a gay acquaintance.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, right, exactly.
Yeah.
So I want to figure out how to be a Jesus follower who pays attention to the least of these that I have paid no attention to, and learn more about their point of view and their situation, and work as hard for that as I have about learning about Black folks' point of view and situation and prisoners' point, all those things.
Yeah.
And I don't want to lose sight of the clear and present danger.
Both of those things.
And I think we can do both. And it's going to be a freaking long haul.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the Holy Spirit is at work.
She is.
We believe.
Yes. Yes. I have felt over the last few days God's presence. And it's not that I've been seeking God in a different way. I've probably been praying a little more recently just because of everything the feelings that come up. And when they come up, I try to address those in prayer. I don't think I'm doing anything that different. And yet I'm really sensing God's presence. I said before this election that I felt like the Holy Spirit was already at work. And that I believed that the outcome of this election was going to humble a lot of people.
Yeah.
I just didn't realize which side was going to get humbled.
I didn't realize that the humility was going to be headed in your direction.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do think that one thing that may become abundantly clear as we go along is just how anti-Christ Trump is.
Yeah.
And that it may become clearer and clearer to people who have been really blinded to that.
Yeah.
He was more than happy to have the votes of the Christian right. And now this is his agenda.
Yep.
And
we knew his agenda all along.
And it's always been that way.
Yep.
So nothing has changed. He has not camouflaged who he is, what he wants to do, any of that.
Nope.
Many people who voted for him are going to be more than disappointed. I do believe that. So I don't think it's just those of us left and center left that should be afraid.
Yeah.
I think the whole country should be afraid.
Agreed.
The people that he's starting to talk about putting into very important positions are people whose character we already have seen demonstrated. We've read about them in the news for years, how they treat people and what they really think of their supporters.
Yeah.
So it is going to be a very dark time, but I do believe that the Holy Spirit is at work, and the opportunity for us to grow and learn and become more like Jesus, maybe in my lifetime, has never been this palpable.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
It just feels...
The palpability piece.
Yeah, it just feels like, it is easy to talk about following Jesus. We want to follow Jesus. We want to love people. We want to be generous of heart. We don't want to condemn anybody.
Right.
And all of that is true, but it's hard to not be affronted by the votes of over half the country. Now, what the Brooks article did for me was it helped me understand why many of them chose to vote the way they did.
Right.
It doesn't explain everybody.
No.
I'm still furious at all the bros. I'm like, what was that?
Yeah.
Their reasons, the tech bros in particular out here where we are, their reasons clearly have nothing to do with anything we're talking about.
Right.
But what I have been challenged to do is to be compassionate and understanding towards people that are barely getting by, have been barely getting by, and feel overlooked and ignored.
Yes.
And their issues and their struggles and their suffering is very, very real.
Yes.
When you are a coal miner and that's all you know, and every little while the talk amps up that they're going to close the mine because of fossil fuels and everything else, and that's all you know, and you have kids and you have a wife and you have people you're providing for and a roof to keep over everyone's head, And you don't know what you're going to do if they close the mine.
Right.
And that's a very real reality for a lot of people.
A lot of people.
So trying to understand, trying to be empathetic, and it takes a lot. Mm-hmm. It takes a lot when you have been educated the way I've been educated, when you've had the opportunities I've had in my life and continue to have. The things that I get to do and be a part of are amazing.
Yes.
And I am a tiny part of a percent of a part of a percent of people who get to do all the things that I get to do.
Right.
And so starting there and recognizing that and really letting that soak in and understand really truly how privileged I am.
Right.
And then trying to figure out, well, how can I use what I have and use what I know to make things better for someone who doesn't have nearly the opportunities that I have.
Yes.
And that's tricky. I have family in rural Alabama, and the county where they are has no hospital. I've done some research recently, and I've learned that 23 counties of Tennessee's 97 or so have no hospital. And I'm feeling a real empathy toward people who have no access to health care. I had an aunt, my father's sister, who passed away last year. I'm convinced she would still be alive if there had been a hospital in their county. She had inadequate care for years. So I think one of the things that we really have to do is we have to do a little soul searching and figure out how can we try to understand better the plight of, even if it's 25% of the people who voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
That's a significant bunch of people.
Yep.
And we can do a better job of understanding where they are and how we can help them. Nothing that I saw, nothing that I received, and I was bombarded with emails and texts just like everybody else on the Democrat platform addressed any of that.
Agreed.
So it's understandable that they would not want to give their vote to people who have no understanding, no concern. They're not on the Democrats' radar.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm sitting with all of this. Yeah. And I do believe that this is the Holy Spirit prompting me to think about all of this differently.
Yeah.
And so I'm hopeful that even as those of us over here on this side are going to be really struggling, some of us may really suffer, that the Holy Spirit can also use this time to educate us, to soften our hearts, to make us aware, to open our eyes, our ears, our hearts, our minds to whatever it is that we need to see and whatever it is we need to know to follow Jesus better.
Yes.
By helping people right around us that we've been blind to.
The battle for justice cannot be for just one group. Right?
Right.
And so when we talk about medical deserts are an easy way to point to it. If we are talking about our queer educated selves, friends, and so forth, we also need to be talking about your aunt.
Yes.
And the fact is, we tend to think of white people as having all the power, which is true and not true.
Mm-hmm.
If I go into a courtroom against another white woman and I know what the words mean and I know how to behave and I know how to talk to people, I'm going to come out better.
Yep.
And that's just a simple fact. The Holy Spirit both guides and convicts us. And my hope for myself and for our listeners and for anyone who's basically trying to be just a decent person is that we protect the ones who need protecting, including our friends and including the people we have been working for ages.
Yes.
That we continue those fights and we add another one.
Mm-hmm.
We add also the fight to see people we have not seen.
Yeah.
We can't demand that other people do the same.
No.
Right? It isn't like if I go to Thanksgiving in Alabama and I am confronted with somebody dancing around in a MAGA hat. Mm-hmm. It's not my job to make them see my point of view.
Definitely not. No.
At all.
No.
It is my job to ask questions, to listen, to be as polite as I can be, to take breaks if I need to. And if I find it so triggering and so scary that I can't be there, don't freaking be there.
Yes.
Protect yourself. It's okay to do all of that stuff. It's okay to be feeling those things and to take care of yourself.
Right.
And in the moments where we're not feeling afraid or not feeling like the world is coming to an end, or any of those moments where we feel the least bit balanced, that's when we start listening to the voices we haven't listened to, whatever they are.
Yeah.
And I suspect that there are many people on the right who are wondering some of the same things. Like, what, even if they're happy, what happened here? Why did 20 million people who voted on the left in 2020 not show up at all?
Right.
They've got to be wondering, right? But it's not my job to make them wonder. It's my job to correct my own blindness, to listen and learn, fight for justice for all, and protect the people who need protecting.
Yes. Yes to all of that. Yes to all of that. Listeners, we love hearing from you. This is the beginning of a very long road for all of us, regardless of how you voted. Yeah. I think all of us would benefit from being in prayer about what our stands need to be going forward. And I think everything you said is so important about protecting those we love, protecting those we've been protecting, advocating for those we've been advocating for, and also challenging ourselves to be more aware of the need that exists and the very real struggles that people are facing that would drive them to vote the way they voted. Even though I'm sure there are things about Donald Trump that they don't like or don't agree with, they saw him as their only option.
And they saw in him, I mean, this is a man who eats McDonald's, whose suits don't fit,
right?
Who talks crassly rather than talking about hope,
right?
And, all those kinds of things, right? And there's somebody who, even though he grew up rich and was educated and dodged the draft and did all of those things, he grew up in Queens instead of in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And that gives a whole different sense of who you are in the world.
It's true.
And I think that there are many, many people who saw that and said, I don't like anything except I think he understands some of what I'm going through.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right.
And there you are.
And there you are. Listeners, we're at cocktailtheology.com. Would love to hear from you. Reach out anytime with ideas for episodes, questions, comments. You can disagree with us. We can handle it. But we just love hearing from you. So I hope you'll reach out. Till next time.
Funny how the view can change, how life just seems to rearrange itself, no matter what it was. I don't know how it goes, but look, moving on feels pretty good. Moving on feels pretty good.
If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like and hit subscribe wherever you're listening right now. We welcome your comments, questions, and ideas for conversations and for cocktails. Please get in touch with us at our website, cocktailtheology.com. Cocktail Theology is a production of SFS. Our theme song is Moving On Feels Pretty Good, recorded by yours truly, Benton Stokes. You can find my music wherever you stream your favorite artists. Join us next Thursday for another new episode.